Other features of Visicalc include the ability to sum lists of numbers and set up bar graphs. The user can control the formatting of numbers and the text, including establishing a second window on the screen, which allows two different parts of the sheet to be viewed at once. As you can see, Visicalc can take care of the details of calculations and keep track of where the data is. It is important that the user be able to construct a solution to his or her problem simply by laying out the necessary information on the sheet. The user is then freed to work with the application. This work with the application is in contrast to the traditional model of programming, which requires that the problem be essentially worked out before the program is written. The goal of Visicalc is to provide a tool with which people can make effective use of the computer. It does not try to do everything, and does require some effort on the part of the user in order to simply apply it to a specific application. Using Visicalc may be likened to having a personal car in a world with a choice of either to build your own or depend on buses, canned applications that probably do not want to go where you want to anyway. We can illustrate the concept of manual control by looking back at the budget example above. Instead of relying on a complicated budgeting program or having to sit down and plan an elaborate budgeting system, we just set up calculations on a month-by-month basis and try different values. While we could have established a formula that tells us what rent we can afford for a given amount of income, we instead tried the different values. At the same time, we were able to see what would happen given more money, a cold winter, or additional expenses. The important point is that Visicalc allows the user to just solve the problem using familiar tools and concepts. This in contrast with using a canned program, which has a fixed idea of how one should go about budgeting. As the problems to be solved get more difficult, the task of producing a general canned program becomes exceedingly difficult and expensive. Using Visicalc, with a small amount of manual effort, the user has a very effective and economical tool. Furthermore, the tool is more flexible than many of the more complicated programs and more amenable to trying out new ideas. The emphasis on manual operation should not obscure the sophistication inherent in Visicalc. The sophistication is necessary in order to make the system simple to use. One of the flaws in the current generation of personal computers is that their attempts to provide simple computer shifts the difficulties in programming to the implementer, the packages, and to the user. This stems from the difficulty in finding the appropriate level of sophistication. We hope Visicalc is at the appropriate level. While Visicalc chooses to leave some of the decisions to the user, these are generally associated with the user's specific applications rather than irrelevant programming considerations. Inevitably, a user who understands an application will find it easier to set it up than one who does, but one has an opportunity to play with the application in Visicalc and thereby learn. The software problem. As personal computers become more common, the software problem becomes increasingly the limiting factor in the ability to use the personal computer. The current attempt to get everyone to learn and use BASIC is not the answer. Much of what is involved in programming is conceptualization and description, the hard parts of problem solving. Even the ultimate in general-purpose procedural languages will not remove the difficulties in programming. These languages are, of course, necessary for those people who do programming, such as the personal computer software engineers. But there are simply not enough programs available to write all the canned applications that can be anticipated. Thus, our task as professionals becomes one of finding the appropriate level of tools that correspond to the level at which the user deals with the application. On large computers, this has been done with the database languages such as IBM's Query by Example, QBE. At MIT, the Maximum program provides a powerful tool for doing symbolic manipulation of mathematical expressions. For personal computers, Visicalc presents an interface to the user which builds upon what he is already familiar with. It is, of course, constrained by the memory and processing limits of the current generation of personal computers. Summary. Visicalc brings the user a familiar and powerful combination of a calculator and paper which permits the user to make effective use of the personal computer without the overhead of programming, nor the constraints of canned applications. But Visicalc is more than just a visible calculator. It is a modest database system that permits easy maintenance and manipulation of information. Visicalc illustrates a principle of application design. It takes care of the memory, data structures, and other matters meaningful only to programmers. It strikes a balance between the simplicity and sophistication. Visicalc chooses to leave the user those decisions which are generally associated with a specific application rather than the irrelevant programming considerations. I just want to close this by adding another comment. As I worked through it, it made me think about the problems I'm attempting to address with our telecommunication network. Today, telecommunications is very much locked into the canned applications, just as computing was back in 1979. My goal is to give people the power of the basic communications facilities without being burdened by and limited to the applications provided by network providers. It's 30 years later, but we still have a lot of work to do.